Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. This is Phil Stevens. You're on Iron Radio. I am a strength coach, football coach, wrestling coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and a bunch of other things. So,
nice. Hey, this is Dr. Mike Nelson. We are back from Texas and traveling. Associate professor at the Carrick Institute, creator of the Flex Diet Cert, which opens mid-January next year. And yeah, it was nice to sleep in my own bed and train in the garage again.
Yeah. Like Tom Platz used to say, it's like coming home. Like when you have a barbell, and, I mean, you're literally talking about coming home, but yeah, I always feel like that too. If I'm out traveling or whatever, if I can just grab some dumbbells or a barbell or something, you just feel like this is home somehow.
Especially when you're in your own place, you get to listen to your own music and there's nobody else in it.
Oh, I know. I love that. That's the introvert.
Yep.
I love empty gyms, or even just lifting in my basement, which I'm trying to do a little bit despite the surgical boot and everything that's slowing me down by tenfold. Anyway, I am a professor of about 25 years, food industry and academic consultant, former competitive bodybuilder of about that long. Okay. I still get a bunch of stuff coming across my desk. It just happens. Before I get to the news, which is about something that might affect your ring or watch sensor in the future. We'll leave it at that for now. I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping as far as news goes. Those of you who get the Iron Radio newsletter, that's probably going to be sunset. That was an experiment this year. It was sort of a usefulness test. The vendor that we use for that is not very helpful, and it's not really sustainable. So we're going to give the option, so long as it's okay with Mike, to anybody who would like to just go to Mike's newsletter instead. We have a link in there. We'll do that for the next couple of times, just so you know. I don't want anybody who's used to looking at the newsletter over the last 6 or 8 months or however long we've been doing that it's just stop. Where is it? Well, the newsletter is going to be sunset. So in other news, the other podcast that I do, the Nutrition Radio podcast, that was a 2023 effort. We're almost at the end of that. So from that perspective, that's going to be sunset. I don't have the time to work and do this and do that. So that was the new thing that was going to go. Part of the impetus for that was to get a bunch of updated nutrition content online. I did that. That's been done. So, but again, there was a lot of crosstalk anyway. Number 3, I am working on a book for human kinetics. I know Mike is as well.
Hey, congrats.
We both know that it's not efficient to take on book chapters or whole books. Like, it's a huge work.
It is a massive amount of time for little yay. That's why I was saying
right.
that, because no one else gives you kudos, really.
Right. And the other scientists, they give you more kudos and yay for a 5-page manuscript, than for a 500-page book. But what I thought I would do is I checked with the editor there, Corey, and Mike and I both know Corey. He's been on the show before.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, that's cool. If you want to talk about specific entries in the book, because the book it's basically dietary supplement ingredients for healthcare professionals. So it's written at sort of a moderate level. I might start in coming weeks, just FYI, read little snippets. These are just little snippets in the book, like even requests from listeners. You're like, what's up with citicoline, or what's up with, omega-3s or fungal proteins? We have entries for everything. And I'll just read you a little update, like from the literature. It's almost like what you might see on Ergolog or, some of these websites that just sweep the literature and look for what's cool and what's new. So, is that a conflict of interest? Maybe. I don't know. I guess it promotes the book, but I don't even have any information to promote the book. I just thought it would be neat to share these individual ingredients. And if anybody wanted to know, what's up with X, Y, or Z, well, like we just said, I put a bunch of work into it. I might as well share it. So, and they're okay with that. The publisher's okay with that. So we'll include some cool ingredients, not drugs. Don't ask me about some peptide, or heavy anabolics. That's not what I'm talking about. Foods and supplements. Okay. Having said that, the news today is a little bit different from normal. This is from Nature, And anybody who ever looks at Nature, this is arguably the premier journal probably on Earth. Pretty chewy, so we're going to keep this light touch on this one. Wearable biosensor measures fertility hormones in sweat. Now, anybody who's listened for a long time knows that I've been saying I'm not touching those damn Apple Watches until they start giving me some kind of, blood-related markers. I don't care if you use something in my sweat or interstitial fluid. I don't care. We used to have gluco watches and stuff like that, and now they have lots of things for, continuous glucose monitoring. But this is reproductive hormones. It caught my eye. This is by Amanda Hite for Nature. Ring-like device blends nanoelectronics and folded RNA to track hormone levels without the need for invasive blood tests. And they show a picture of a ring, the prototype, on someone's index finger. It says researchers have designed a wearable ring-like biosensor for monitoring hormones, specifically the hormone estradiol in human sweat. The technology is a fast-acting, non-invasive advance over conventional methods for tracking fertility and women's health. Now, obviously, with a bodybuilding and power sport background, when I hear reproductive hormones, I also think testosterone or other things that we might monitor in the blood. Now, obviously, this is not going to be finger pricking you, right? So it says the single-use sensor described in a study published in Nature Nanotech combines microfluidics and emerging electrotechnology with a group of molecules called aptamers to measure hormone levels in real time. Now, when it says single-use sensor, I'm like, what? Are you going to have to put a cartridge in your ring? Like, I don't understand that part. But it says this feeds into a growing demand for technology that puts personalized health care in the hands of patients. Previously, people who needed their hormone levels monitored had to travel to a clinic, get blood tests, send away samples to a lab, etc. Those options tend to be invasive, time-consuming. It says blood remains the gold standard, but now researchers are increasingly interested in other fluids and the health information that they contain. So it would make sense, everybody, right, that if you can get sweat or interstitial fluid from a tiny microneedle or something, if you can measure something in those fluids that correlates highly with a blood level of something, you can get an indirect approximation of that and probably get pretty accurate. These engineers like Mike, they're blowing my mind all the time. It says, we know, for example, there are clinically relevant biomarkers present in sweat, but at extremely low concentrations, says Wei Gao, W-E-I, Wei Gao, a biomedical engineer at Cal Institute of Technology in Pasadena and co-author of the study. So far, no sensors or wearable devices have been developed that specifically target reproductive hormones in sweat. So this is sort of the new thing. It says Gao relies on aptamers, short bits of single-stranded DNA or RNA that are designed to fold such that they bind to targets ranging from small molecules to toxins. They're like antibodies, but they're smaller. They can be synthesized chemically rather than in like lab animals. Researchers have previously designed aptamers to recognize cortisol. I could see some handiness there. Serotonin, caffeine, and even some cancer markers. So this is prototype stuff. The stuff that you see in Nature is not necessarily ready for commercialization. But this is sort of that step toward what I've been hoping. Now, again, this is in a ring, and it looks kind of plasticky, like it might actually cause you to sweat under the ring. And I don't know how this would work with a watch. Maybe, people sweat under their watch a little, I guess. But yeah, this is the direction that I was kind of keeping my ear to the ground for. I mean, cortisol, caffeine. I mean, imagine if all of a sudden you have a ring or a watch, and not only are you getting continuous blood glucose, but cortisol, caffeine, testosterone. Yes, please. Right now we're at a point where I'm willing to spend money. I was looking at the premier Apple Watch recently. It's like $800.
Whoa, is that how much it is now?
$780, or I couldn't believe it. I'm like, Plus, I like my old school gear watch. Gear, it's metal. It's got a metal band. It's just old man watch. It's not some rubber band neon purple thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I like my Garmin Phoenix. I'm kind of biased. I even have like the 3 models outdated now, but I don't know. Does everything I need to and more.
Yeah. I mean, this will be so convenient for someone like you, Mike, who loves to monitor biomarkers, in your clients. We'll see where this goes. I think it's a couple of years out, but just the idea that this is what I've been speculating about, but now the science is actually supporting it. Like, there's something that we can measure in your sweat that's indirectly, linked to the hormone level of interest without having to do, blood draws and all that kind of stuff. So
I just think that makes it interesting because I want to find this old study, can't find it, that had people do serial testosterone measurements just from blood, and the variability was rather high. I can't remember how high it was, but these are people just came in and you just sit in a chair and we just keep drawing a bunch of, blood from you and we go analyze it. But I'm always curious about, someone goes in and they're like, oh, your levels are 600. And then, ooh, now it dropped to 420. It's like, oh no, how horrible. It's like, well, probably not that big of a deal, but how much of that is just the biologic variability of the system too?
Absolutely.
Seems like a basic question.
Well, something like glucose, other than eating, you're going to get obviously steadier measures. But yeah, the pulsatility of hormones, you're either going to have to educate consumers or do something like they do with metabolic carts, how they'll average
average
breaths.
It all out. Yeah.
And like, we took 20 measurements and here's your average in the last hour, something like that. Yeah, because otherwise people, you're right. Oh my God, I'm low testosterone. It was like 200. And no, it's 600. No, and now it's 400. Yeah.
Oh, this watch is a piece of crap.
Exactly. In fact, when, like you said, it's biological pulsatility. Cortisol, all those hormones would be so hard. I know in my dissertation, I was looking at a lot of this stuff and that topic came up. It's like, oh God. Yeah, but maybe they can average it out or something. But yeah, as tech moves forward, I probably will drop the curmudgeon and go, get the technology. But to Mike's point, Mike, you love the word useful. I've noticed over the years, like it's something now it's useful, right? For my purposes. So
yeah, and then just like HRV is now in every device, it'll get to the point in the future where it kind of crosses useful to, my opinion, non-useful and just oversaturated and then just flat out wrong because the context is bad.
Oh boy. In fact, Mike, we did get that listener question I mentioned about HRV. Since we have a little bit of time before the break, can you just explain, with a focus on like the origins and is it valid to an actual medical professional, or is this, especially the way that I think like Apple and a lot of the tech companies, they grab onto this, like you said, they change the context. They don't realize that there's all these domains and all this depth, and it's kind of started with ECG and all this kind of stuff, and it wasn't just a number on a watch. Can you just talk about the origins and the validity of this and how it might be useful to people that are actually medical professionals?
Yeah, so if people want a reference, there's a paper by Dr. George Billman. I think it's just called The History of HRV. It's open access. It's phenomenal, like the best synopsis of the history of HRV I've ever read. But there's even stuff back in, Chinese medicine that says if his heart beats like a metronome, he has very little time left. So the concept of you want a little bit of difference at rest, at steady state, from one heartbeat to the next. So the I'd say more modern HRV was first used by the Russian cosmonauts because they needed a way to figure out what was the health of people they shot into space. And at that time, the rate limiter was how much data you could transmit back and forth through that distance. This is like in the 60s. And what they found was they could only transmit about 5 or 6 bits of code a line at one time, which, by modern standards is basically nothing. So what they did was they figured out by using heart rate variability, they would measure from one R wave to the next. So listeners know you've got the QRS complex, which is the ventricle contraction, so lower chamber of the heart. And they would measure from the top of the pointy R wave to the next pointy R wave. And they would submit that line of code. So they would say, okay, it's 610 milliseconds. The next beat is 615 milliseconds. And then back on Earth, they would take that and they would run the variability analysis. So how different is one heartbeat from the next? And that is basically heart rate variability. And what that number tells you then is the more fine scale variability. So it's differing just a little bit. That's a marker for parasympathetic activation. So your autonomic nervous system has 2 main branches. The parasympathetic is kind of classically called the rest and digest. It's like just hitting the brake on your car. I increase parasympathetic, what's called vagal tone. I step harder on the brake. The car slows down. So your heart rate slows down, other things like that change. They also have the sympathetic side, which is like stepping on the gas pedal of the car. Step on the gas pedal of your car, the engine accelerates, the car moves forward. There's more stress, but you get more output. So when you're under sympathetic stress, heart rate goes up, you get more contractility, you get more basically output from it, but it is a signal of more stress. The heart rate variability is just simply the balance between parasympathetic versus sympathetic. Most devices use just simply what's called a time domain measurement. They don't have to worry about frequency domain nonlinear methods. That gets into lots of math and fast Fourier transforms and stuff no one gives a hoot about unless you're doing the algorithms itself. So the good part is HRV is an extremely accurate way of telling you the status of your autonomic nervous system if it's done and collected correctly. When I started doing this in the lab, 13, 14 years ago now, we had $20,000 of used equipment, and I had to write a program in MATLAB and have people come into the lab and hook them up to an ECG and do all this monkey motion just to get a single HRV reading. Now you can get it through like the iFleet app, which is like $4. Most watches will give it to you, etc. So the downside, however, is you have to check to see if the algorithm is accurate. Most of the new ones are pretty good. Like even the optical off the wrist is not too bad because they'll average it out over the course of the night. Aura has published their data. It's actually extremely accurate off of the ring. Most of the apps are pretty decent now. The downside, though, is because it does give you the status of your autonomic nervous system, companies get crazy and they're like, hey, let's just tell people this all the time now. It's like, because drinking water, like if you drink a half liter of water with electrolytes, it'll change your HRV. Coffee, movement, all sorts of these things will change the status of your autonomic nervous system. And so they're giving you this HRV reading, which a lot of times has a capacity to be an accurate measurement at that point in time, but the context matters. Because I've gotten things from people that are like, yeah, I went to lift and it was telling me I was very stressed and I got super worried. I'm like, but you want to be more sympathetic when you're going to lift something heavy. Like you want that sympathetic activation. So I would say most people now do the measurement first thing in the morning. It's a commanded measurement, like with the iFleet app, or you're getting the data overnight from a watch or from a ring like Aura. After that, you probably don't really need to look at it at all unless you really know what you're doing, you understand the context of it. Last point is, I've lost a few consulting gigs where they're like, hey, you're the HRV person. We want to bring you in on this project. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Well, we want to tell HRV when someone's training to look at their rest periods and when they need to exercise again. And I'm like, just use heart rate recovery. Like using HRV is a horrible idea. And they're like, oh, well, we like this idea. And so then they get mad at me. So I usually tell them their idea is stupid, and then that's the end of the consulting gig.
Yeah. They'll find somebody with a PhD to agree with them and
usually
push it.
It was like they wanted someone to co-sign that their algorithm was good and then put your face all over their Instagram.
Exactly. Yeah. Hold up the product and smile, Mike.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, sorry, not going to happen. So.
Well, let me ask you this then, because obviously this is used for overtraining or like that sort of concept. But reading back to Andy Fry's early stuff, you've heard me go on about him over the years. There's parasympathetic and then there's sympathetic overtraining, right? So generally one is the endurance type exhaustive. You're just exhausted. You're overtraining. And then with the sympathetic type, you obviously, like I think he had them do 10 1-rep maxes a day for 2 weeks. I mean, brutal.
Beat the shit out of them.
Yeah. And they couldn't turn off the adrenaline, if you will. Right.
Yep.
So knowing that there are 2 kinds of overtraining, do they educate their consumers with that kind of stuff like iFleet or other companies? Or because it seems like they're painting with a very broad brush to say, here's your HRV number, time for a break. Right?
Yeah.
Because these 2 overtraining types are opposite, runners versus lifters, if you will.
Yep. And that's the issue, is the interpretation of the data. So shout out to Simon at iFleet. I think they've done a pretty good job with the iFleet Pro. They'll give you like kind of a green, amber, red. You'll still get that on the basic device too. And I worked with Simon for years. They're the first company I worked with. I have a whole education product with them, so I'm biased towards them. And that's pretty darn accurate. Like, so green meaning you're probably good. Amber, like, you're getting more stressed. Like a red on their system, definitely time for a day off. And so with theirs, they're looking at changes from your 7-day baseline and some other metrics in the background. So it's actually pretty good. What I prefer to do with most systems, though, is just look at the number. Each system will report a slightly different number. The lower the number, the more sympathetic, the more stressed you are. The higher the number, the more parasympathetic you are. Most lifters won't see long-term parasympathetic overreaching or frank overtraining.
Right.
You will see that in endurance athletes, though.
Mm-hmm.
Endurance athletes who do this too much moderate duration, not zone 2, but just kind of moderate cardiac development stuff for hours on end for long periods of time.
Right. Exhaustive.
They can actually see high parasympathetic tone. You ask them, what do you feel like? They feel like dog shit. They can't get off the couch. They're drooling on themselves all day. They're literally just shut down. Lifters tend to be more on the sympathetic side. The HRV will be lower, and they tend to feel similarly, but they're going in the other direction. So the good part about that is if you know what direction they're going, you can then time your interventions to match that. But for most lifters, if they are too far on the sympathetic stress side, anything that is more parasympathetic will help. Everything from long exhales, meditation, sauna if it's not too aggressive, longer walks, movement, those kind of stuff, more sleep. So the good part is if you know where you're at, you can then tailor your interventions to that. And then the last point on that is, for whatever reason, some lifters, if they're doing a lot of very heavy lactate-based stuff, they can see a short-term parasympathetic overreach, meaning not the next day, but it appears to be delayed by 24 to 36 hours. They get this super high parasympathetic tone. And early on, I made the mistake of thinking, oh my God, these guys are like super recovered, but their training performance on that day was dog shit. Like Phil's ran into this, I think you said, with one of your meets too. And if you are too high parasympathetic, you feel like crap. You're tired, your performance sucks, like you try to get up for your lifts, like nothing happens. So acutely in some lifters, that can happen also. But if you know that, you can either take time off and wait it out, or you can get super fancy and do like a high trap bar pin pull for 5 to 8 seconds. So isometric, you're pulling against the pins as hard as you can right below lockout. You're amping your sympathetic nervous system, but you're not using really any load. There's no eccentric load. There's almost no volume. You're trying to hit yourself with a high sympathetic tone, but very, very controlled. And sometimes that's enough to get people back into a normal range the next day.
Right. So in both cases, rest is the answer, because obviously you can't look at this in just one way, this red, yellow, green kind of infographic, right? Because like what I remember about Andy Fry's stuff was he got mechanistic, and he's like, well, the unique ways that these power athletes have the constant sympathetic drive and can't turn it off and adrenaline and all that, but they have like a 30 or 40% drop in like beta 2 adrenoceptors or something. Like they can't respond to the adrenaline that they're dumping. So in both of those cases, though, it would call for some interpretation on the person that's using it. Is that basically what you're saying? Or you're saying the red, yellow, green is applicable to either kind of athlete? I'm just trying to get a bottom line for listeners, right?
Yeah, so 2 bottom lines. One, my general rule of thumb is if, like on the athlete system, which is what I'm most familiar with, if it's green, do your normal training. If it's amber and you're a strength and power athlete and you want to stay on track, you can either flip your training for an aerobic day and do your lifting the next day if you have room in your schedule. If you don't have room in your schedule to do that, take your volume and cut it by half. So your intensity, everything else stays the same, but you're not digging a bigger hole into your recovery capacity. So your parameters, all that stuff stays the same, other than your volume is cut in half. If it's red, probably take a day off, do some walking, that type of thing. The only caveat I will add to that is you have to play with it yourself and know how you respond to specific training. So for myself, like I've done upper body dude bro days when my HRV is red, just because even though it's a lot of volume, it just doesn't hit my nervous system that hard. But if I go out and do like an hour and a half of heavy grip stuff or heavy deadlifts or especially squats, axial loading, that'll torch me. I'll be out for another 3 days after that.
Wow.
So that's the hard part, and where coaching is still useful. You then learn what is the response, run some experiments, and each person will be a little bit different. Again, lifters can do that on their own too, but that makes the interpretation a little harder. So I always tell people that the golden rule I have is that HRV is only telling you the status of your autonomic nervous system at the time the measurement was taken. Use that data to then determine what is going to be best for you on average.
Right. Okay. Now, medically, and I don't want to belabor this too much, but is this prognostic of like a 3-day length of stay, someone who's going to end up on a vent, or you know what I mean? Or how are physicians using this as a prediction? Like, this guy is under enormous, sympathetic stress. That's bad. We need to do XYZ with drugs, or obviously rest is kind of built in an inpatient setting. I mean, if they're in a bed, but you know what I mean? Like, what else would this be indicative of, or predictive of?
Yeah, so it was first used in like fetal heart monitors, right, to get an idea of what the stress of the baby is, especially during different time periods where you need some non-invasive method. When I worked in the medical device industry, we measured it in all of our devices that were implantable pacemakers, defibrillators, especially the defibs, to treat heart failure. So we would use the EPs, electrophysiologists, would use that as a marker to determine if the therapy, the device, or pharmacology was effective, because they would see changes in heart rate variability over time. So it has been used in a lot of different things. And then also, if you expand that to just variability analysis of fine scale changes, has been used to look at sway, breathing rates. My thesis, that was the whole point of my thesis, was using it for a metabolic heart, fuel usage for metabolic flexibility. So anything that shows these kind of fine scale variability changes, and we've looked at it, do tend to be probably one of the best non-invasive prognostics of what's going on.
But only to a specialist, right, or an engineer, because I'm getting the impression that this is not in wide use amongst nurses or physicians.
And that's my pet peeve, because it provides really good information. But again, as we just had a 20-minute soliloquy on it, it's telling you the status of the autonomic nervous system, but you still have to interpret that in the context of the case in terms of what's actually going on, right? And that's, people wanted like, just, is it good or bad, right? It's kind of back to that discussion again. So it's useful, but in my opinion, it's not used as much as what it could be, because most of medicine and everything that's derived and taught is based on averages, not variability. The second you mention variability, people are like, what the hell are you even talking about?
So we would need CEUs for the nurses and the doctors, right? And the primary care docs. Is that what you're like? They would need to know how to interpret, because it could be, it would be, I think, a valuable piece of information for them if they understood it, I guess, and had access to it, right?
Yeah. And the ones who use it a lot of times, like, looking at fetal heart monitors, most of them probably don't know that that's actually a variability analysis, but they've gotten accustomed to using it and they know what it means and they have experience with it. So it's just something that they use all the time. So there are some areas that it is used more than other areas.
Okay. Yeah. Built into the systems they're already using. They just don't even know, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, sorry, anybody who's not a geek. Most of our listeners are both. We're going to go to break, and then we come back. Phil's going to lead us in some cool stuff. Hey, everybody. Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast.
It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio / Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we are back. And we were initially talking about another topic, but I'm calling an audible here because we'll just do that another day and give me longer to look into what we were going to talk about. So this popped up on something the other day. I was listening to a podcast or something, and then it just popped across my screen a minute ago, and the actual numbers popped up. So it all has to do with basically all of us as gym goers or iron addicts or whatever you want to call us that have been in the gym for a long time. We all generally have a poor outlook on where we stand, and a lot of that has been exacerbated via social media because of course everybody posts. Like, you see everybody benching 500 pounds, and everybody and their grandma is deadlifting 700 now. And that's what I tell people when I go to meets. It's like, man, I remember when 700 was strong, when I first did it. Like, I was one of few people, and I was a outlier. But so there was recently a study done. I can't tell you by who right now. I don't have it with me. But the question was, what percentage of the population can bench 225? And they did two separate studies. One was done just the population as a whole. And the other was frequent gym goers. Frequent meant they go to the gym like religiously at least 3 days a week. So what would your guys' guess be on that on the frequent gym goers population that can bench 225?
I'm going to say 30%. And I'm basing that off of like most, not powerlifting, strongman gyms I've been in, just gen pop gyms I've been in. You don't see too many people even do 225, but maybe I'm shooting a little bit low. If I only lived on social media, I'd say it's 95%, but.
Oh yeah, that's right. My best friend's cousin benched 405 when he was 14.
Right. A t-shirt raw.
Right.
That's nothing.
Yeah. I guess I would go about a third. Yeah. But then it may be quite different, right? The average gym goer is not a barbell trainer. And did I miss that, Phil? Like, what was the details?
No, it's just people that the average person that goes to the gym 3 days a week. Like, this is all the people that frequent
recreational lifter.
Yep. Like all of them. It's not like training for strength.
Not even just lifters.
Just any person that goes to the gym 3 days a week.
Yeah. I think it's less than a third, actually.
3%.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Wow.
All of a sudden, I feel better about my bench press.
That's what I said. Right? I was like, holy crap, I need to share this with all my clients.
That's even lower than I would have guessed, for sure.
And then they broke it down on up the spectrum for just the population as a whole. They did 225, 315, 405, and 495. Ooh. 225 is 0.075% of the population.
Wow.
In bench 225. 315, they estimate 0.00125%. 50,000 men in the whole world. 405 is 8,000 men. 495, there's 900.
Damn.
Like the 225 one is the one that, like, holy moly. I mean, it didn't like that. I understand the 315. That was a big milestone for me when I reached that for the first time. And
that takes some dedication and work.
405 is even bigger. You don't just accidentally, unless you're like, there's freaks out there. Like Derek Poundstone probably like benched 215 when he was 12 on accident.
Yeah.
But like the average gym goer, I don't think looks at 315 as something big, and it is. I mean, it takes dedicated years of training, and unless you're just one of those freaks. But like 225, really, like I thought the average gym goer or the average person in the world was in better shape than that. But I mean, not the bench is like the mark that I want everybody measuring themselves against. It's probably
but it's the most common lift, you would argue.
It is.
Most people do.
That's
like if you go to a commercial gym, you see barbell bench press way more than a deadlift and squat.
Yes, that's what surprised me about the 3%. Like,
right.
Of all the lifts that people do,
right,
it's probably the one that's used the most. Like everybody, all the bench pros, like it's fucking Monday, bro. Time to work pecs.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really surprised at 3%. Now, I mean, if you add in, of course, I'm guessing those statistics are like any kind of physical activity gym. So you got, you're counting all the people that go to curves and body camp and whatever. So, but still, 3% of however many billion people are in this world. I was surprised at that. So.
For comparison, I just pulled up a paper, free weight bench press fitness norms for adults 20 to 29. Now, this is going to bias toward college kids, right? But they're saying, I don't know about this. I may have to look at this more carefully. It looks like they're saying the 50th percentile, 1 rep max. Again, these are apparently fit college students, 215 pounds. But again, they're young.
And but still, that seems high to me. Like, was that all dudes? Because if it was 50% women,
no, this was the dudes. These were the guy numbers.
Well, that makes more sense because this is like the other one I said is, of course, it's not just men.
Yeah, all comers.
It's all gym goers,
and it's not just young people with good joints.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But still, I'm not buying that. Like, I've been on campuses.
Oh.
Like, that was, like, I had to call my wife when I went to this last
that's above
switch.
body weight, right? 215 would be above body weight, so...
Yeah. Well, I don't know about today, Lonnie.
Well, a lot of college kids... Well, you're right, though. I mean, if they have a football team of 100 dudes and they average them in, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the sampling. Like, who are you sampling, I think, is a big part of this one. It is eye-opening when you look at the perspective. How many people in the world, when you think more Gen Pop, people that presumably a lot of people have at least tried a gym or a fitness center of some kind, even if they quit, in short order and they don't do any barbells or anything like that.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing we can take from this, and it's something I've battled with my clients all the time, is like we get a skewed vision via social media.
Oh, yeah.
A hugely skewed one, more than people think. And, like, they get depressed because, like, they get into this fitness thing. So what do? They just follow fitness people. So now you're following 500 fitness people that have been doing this for 20 years. Like, I fell into the trap, 20 years ago. I'm following Dave Tate and Jim Wendler's like, man, I fucking suck. I only squat 500.
Right. Absolutely.
And then if you look at the real numbers, it's like, man, and that's what I have to remind clients. It's like, dude, okay, you're a girl that just benched 185. You're a fucking freak.
Amazing.
And they're like, so Joe's doing 240. I was like, Sally Joe's on trend.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
It's like, God. And it's like, we have such a poor outlook on ourselves. And that's the bad side of social media. I think it puts an unrealistic outlook out there for you. And you got to realize, just take these goals for yourself and realize, versus the average population, I'm doing pretty good. And that's like, I had to call my wife, like I was saying before, on this last trip to Swiss I did. I'm sitting in the airport and I had like an hour and a half layover. So I grabbed like some almonds or something. I'm just sitting back watching people. And it just came to me like 99% of our population is harmless now.
Oh, yeah.
Harmless.
No, like, there wasn't somebody that walked by. I am not in anywhere near the condition I used to be. And it was scary to me that I was like, there's not a person in here that if I just wanted their stuff, that I couldn't just go take it.
Yeah.
And you put that in the wrong person's eyes? Holy, that's a bad thing. I'm not going to go do it, but it's like, you just get one decently in shape dude that has some aggression and some mental problems. they're going to cause havoc on our
Dangerous.
population. Yeah, and it has to boil down to, like, we're seeing it boil down to, like, shortly after our era, like, we don't need physical education in schools. We don't need these kids climbing ropes. We don't need, we've seen this massive decline in the general physical preparedness of our population as a whole. And I don't know, maybe some of those Greek philosophers and stuff had it right about, we don't need to just exercise our mind, but we need to master our bodies as well and get a little more balance going on in this world. And that physical balance actually helps the mental balance and things. So
yeah. I mean, I remember when I was even teaching the exercise phys, like a 400 level class, we had them obviously use metabolic carts and do exercise and all this kind of stuff. And we only were allowed to squat in the Smith machine, which I stopped doing that after the third class because that was a disaster. And then I thought, well, the push-ups can't really be that bad. I don't think there was more than 4 people who did good push-ups. 3 of them were female. Like, the guys were, like, the worst. It just looked like a bunch of flopping seals on the ground. And then you try to explain them and show them what a good push-up looks like, and you realize most of them couldn't do more than a couple reps. Like, a couple reps. I'm like, oh, my God, this is scary.
Yep. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you change it, but I'm not even worried about that as far as this topic. It's just, man, if you got a bad outlook on yourself in anything in life, just don't turn to social media and just look around. I mean, take an honest look at the population as a whole. If you're feeling down on yourself as far as physical fitness goes, and like if you're doing something a few days a week, you're probably better off than 99% of the population. And just keep at it. Be consistent. It's like, holy. And that's really, I think, where people, they've always missed the boat, like we've talked about, is it's a long haul thing, man. And that's something I try to preach to all clients, and I always have, and I've gotten in trouble for it. Like when I've told people it's going to take you 5 or 10 years. But, man, that's the approach we should take, and try and make this a habit and just a part of your life. And you're going to be better off for it.
Right. Yeah. Consistency is key. I think is number one. Yeah. It's, what's the old Ben Franklin quote that what energy and persistence outrank everything else. Right. And I think that's the key. We've all known guys. In fact, my brother was like this. I would always religiously go to the gym. Well, back in the day, it was insane. 4 on, 1 off, kind of. But he would come and go. He'd come for a couple of weeks and then leave for months at a time. Then he'd come for a couple of weeks and then he'd leave for months at a time. And yeah, consistency, diet, training, it's got to be darn near number one. Like, even if you're doing something, right? Something. It doesn't have to be some stellar Olympic level program. It's what you've said before, Phil, and I don't know who originally said it, but a good plan executed now is better than a perfect plan later. I don't know if that was Patton or what it was. Yeah. Like, just do something and do it regularly. That's what I'm trying to do right now in this boot. It's like, man, my right leg is shrinking so fast because it's unweighted, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, God, it's alarming. Like my buddy Steve, one of the reasons he keeps bodybuilding and he's not really that averse to having a power belly and other things is he doesn't want to waste away. He's seen some family members that happen to. But in looking at this experience now with the boot and the cast and the crutches and the unweighting and the bed rest, man, even if you're huge, you're going to waste away in short order. Mm-hmm. Now, don't get me wrong. He's probably buying himself several weeks with all that extra muscle mass. Yeah. Whereas I tried to make the choice, like, what's the level of muscle mass that I'm after? I don't want to get that huge belly, right? Because on my frame, that's just going to look bad. Yep. But, yeah, you would be buying yourself several weeks, but don't think you'd be buying yourself months to years, I wouldn't think. Maybe a few months. Because I can't believe how quickly. So I'm trying to do to the point. something. God, something. I
Yes.
crawled down my basement stairs and grabbed a couple of 40-pound dumbbells, and I'm doing whatever I can to do something, right?
Yeah.
Because nothing, especially as you get older, man, you regress so fast. If you don't have consistency, you're screwed.
That's what we try to tell people. And I think most people, they talk about the gym, they talk about exercise, and they get overwhelmed because they think they need, I need to go from nothing to doing what Phil's doing. And it's like, no.
Oh, no.
Like, literally just, you're doing zero now. How about we start with just go walk? 3 days a week. Until you just always do that. And then you go from there. It's like, just add something and make it habitual.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they do the same thing with diet. And that's why they all fail. Like, we're coming into that season. We've got, 14 days. 14 days before we watch people go from zero. And
Zero
that's
to
the
hero.
problem. Zero to everything. We're going to have a large percentage of the population that on January 1st, they're going to go to the gym 7 days a week and they're going to eat nothing bad.
And they're going to be gone by Valentine's Day.
Yes, gone. Because they tried to change so much. They tried to change so much in their life that they get overwhelmed. And it's awesome for a couple weeks. And then it's horrible because you didn't let your life adapt to those changes. No,
even competitive bodybuilders, I watch them, they don't have a progression model with nutrition. You know how I like to pull out more and more carbs over the weeks across a half a year because I have somewhere to progress. They cut all their carbs, hardcore keto. They lose all this muscle mass because they did it all at once. Yeah. You know, I used to have an old endocrine prof. He's like, Lonnie, the human body has to be coaxed. You can't, you push too hard and homeostasis is going to fight back. Yeah. And that's kind of what you see. And having worked in a commercial gym, to your point about that, for 10 years, I was just a gym grunt, front desk guy in grad school, undergrad, whatever. And the gyms flooded in the first week of January. I dreaded the beginning of January because everybody's guilty and they have all these ridiculous New Year's resolutions. And I know they're going to be gone, but I'm like, just brace yourself because for the next 8 weeks, if that. Right. But they come in every single day completely, like you said, not habitual. They're not incorporating this into their lives. And that's not going to work.
Nope.
Yeah. My little catchphrase is it's violent consistency. And I've actually gotten some hate mail about that too. People are like, why does it have to be violent? I'm like, because it kind of is. Like, you're battling entropy. Like, it's going to get easier over time, but it's never going to get to the point where it's super easy. It's always going to take consistent effort. And again, you don't have to do anything heroic overnight, but it's that consistent effort over time that's just for, weeks, months, decades that adds up. And people just bias intensity at first, but it's very short-lived.
Yes.
Like you guys said, just do a little bit less, but just do that day in and day out. Add one more thing. Just do that day in and day out. And these things add up over time, but it's still going to take some effort. And unfortunately, society, family, everything else is going to be kind of battling for that same amount of time too.
That's the thing though. You got to find, that's part of the balance, especially once you're adulting.
Yeah.
Like, can you really go to the gym 7 days a week? And no, let's start with something you can do and that the rest of your family can handle. Like, hey, I'm going twice a week for an hour. That's a lot better than pissing everybody off and then giving up. And once they're used to that, hey, maybe I can add one more. We've got this figured out. And your life can get it figured out. You have to accept it too. And
it's another reason for coaching, the value of coaches, right? You just have a sounding board. It's just like, of course, my wife's a counselor. She's just that neutral third party. She's your advocate, right? Helper, but somebody who's going to give you tough love when you need to. Same thing very similar with coaches. I think you're saying you're overdoing it right now. What are the reward structures and how, like we talked about last time, people are different. Like, some people need a different kind of motivation. Some of it's okay to be external from the coach, I think, early on until people, it does make you wonder at what point different people become lifers. Like insofar as we are all lifers, when did that happen? Somewhere in the middle, I think, in the intermediate time. I don't know. It's hard to guess. But yeah, I think that's another thing, the art of coaching. Like your Phil's like, I'm a coach of this, a coach of that, a coach of the other. And you start to get pretty good at what people need at different stages, so they can make it habitual.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to like gains and how long they take, right? This is where sometimes I cringe about. I know there's different certifications for life coaching and all that kind of stuff, but everybody wants to be broad brush life coach. It's like, do you understand fitness adaptations or diet? Do you understand that with enough depth? Because if you don't, how do you know if someone's on track? Like strength gains we talk about, like that's a better thing to focus on early because you can make substantial neuromuscular progress in the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and not body fat. So don't even make that a goal. That will come later. And, these are the lessons that we talk about on the show but you have to understand fitness in that way,
Yeah, and this can be problematic too. Like I ran into this the other day. Somebody unnamed became not a coach, a personal trainer, and went through one of the certs. I won't say which one it was. But, and of course, they're using like bioimpedance to measure their clients' body fat and all that stuff. And he posted up, what was it? It was like 4 weeks of results. And look at this. This is why it takes a good coach. And his client supposedly like gained 17 pounds of muscle and lost 8% fat in 4 weeks. And I'm like, bro, ain't happening. Like you're just lying to people. Like if you're saying that, and the bad thing is you're believing it. It's like you're not gaining 17 pounds of muscle in 4 weeks. Like I would doubt that even if you loaded this dude up on a bunch of gas. That's a lot. Like that's a lot of muscle. And like I hope to gain that a lot of times in a year. My best training hard.
Yeah. Even when you're new and you're making crazy gains. Yeah. No. And that's the problem with misinformation. I saw something recently. It was called Bad Science on YouTube. I think it was a YouTube video, ironically, but it was from the BBC or it was from somewhere that was, they have some fact checking going on. And they were showing examples of what, in this case, like kids are exposed to. But think about the fitness community. Yeah, they're so bombarded with bullshit that they wonder, why am I a chump? Why is this not happening to me? It's like that guy he's really excited. The social media, the number of clicks and hits and the reward structure, it rewards drama and lying. And you get bad information. And honestly, it's one of the best things I think people can do is start to understand where you go get good information. We're always like a new study from Nature, a new study from, MedSci, Sports Exercise, whatever it is. At least it's peer reviewed and we can discuss it. But the point is, go for more quality information instead of the bozo. And a lot of times, they are on trend. and then they're like, oh, look how special I am. They want to believe that they're that special. They want the clicks. They want and this is not new. Back in the day in muscle magazines, pro bodybuilder holding up a drum of protein powder. And you're like, as if, right? As if. That's not valid. You're leaving out some critical information.
Yeah, but I mean, those sales pitches sadly work.
Oh, they
that's why they do them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they wouldn't still be doing that if it didn't work. And like he really is taking Muscle Tech protein. Yeah, okay.
Well, he may be.
He is. You're right. That's not doing it. Right. So they're technically not lying, but
that's like what I was joking last week about. That's a bottle rocket on a starship, right? It's not. It's not the Muscle Tech or whatever.
Yeah. Most of these people are genetic freaks to begin with. That's not saying they don't put in hard work and effort or anything like that, but you're just not starting with the same materials, both drugs and genetics, lifestyle, everything else.
Right.
And that's a tough one. Like, because everybody looks at genetic freaks. Like nobody looks at like NBA basketball and says they want to be the dude that's a bench warmer.
Right.
Like they all want to be Michael Jordan, but they're not. You know,
They're 5'4".
but so there's positives and negatives to that. Like we need to aspire to those people and let them push you. Like I always looked up to people like Ed Cohn and stuff like that, but I knew I'm not him. And but you have to be able to recognize that in your own head. And you can use those outliers, those genetic freaks as inspiration and still not look down on yourself for not reaching them.
It might be on a different scale. You know, you have different strengths, you know.
Yeah.
Heroes.
Some people might be genetic freaks. And you don't know that until you just get in there. And generally we see it at a young age. Like I've dealt with some that are like, oh, this kid's just going to be good. You know, he's freaking gifted. Mm-hmm. But you'll know it if you are, you know, after a short period of time. So,
yeah. And even if you're not,
it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, hard work. We've seen people who just won't stay down, and they can become amazing.
Oh, so, I've seen some of my D1 athletes and stuff like that were just hard workers. Mm-hmm. They were the people it didn't come easy to, but from day one, they had to work hard. And I've also had a lot of genetic freaks that gave up because eventually, even for them, it gets hard. You know, and they haven't had to deal with hard.
Right.
Whereas the person that was genetically average has had to deal with hard since day one. So, yeah. So, and that's where the freaks come from. It's like the Ed Cohns, the Michael Jordans, the whatever. They are genetic freaks with work ethic.
Yeah.
You know, and that's
which is actually incredibly rare.
It is. That's why they're rare.
Yeah. Where the magic happens.
Yeah. So. Anyways,
all right, we were all over on that topic, I guess.
Yep. That
was a good one.
Yeah, it was. I like just shooting the shit. So, all right, guys.
All right.
Till next week.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.